Beware, your host, Jonathan Holmes.
Ugh, startling as ever, and sounding a lot like I was last week.
Yeah, right.
At E3. Yeah, Kellee Santiago, how are you?
I'm pretty good, having a pretty mellow Sunday post E3, that's for sure.
That's wonderful. I didn't see you at E3. Were you around?
I was pretty much parked out at the Ouya Park that was happening across the street from the convention center, which got a bit of press as the ESA tried to block it for some reason. I don't know.
That is so strange. There was a lot of stuff going on right around E3. There were some ladies, I think, selling potions, and Devolver Digital was there with like a trailer park, and Ouya was there having like a big free party with free drinks and everything. It's great.
Oh yeah, no, it was a lot. It was a ton of fun. I mean, it was nice to like spend the week outside because it was really beautiful weather for the most part, and also in that list of things that were happening outside, there was SpaceX. I don't know if you saw them stationed outside the convention center, but they're Elon Musk's private space exploration company, and they actually are the only. I believe they're the only private company, because there's some budding up now as NASA's been defunded and all this stuff, that they've actually I think they're the only ones that have successfully actually sent a spaceship into outer space twice to the International Space Station, and they actually had that spaceship there at E3, which was hilarious because there were a bunch of people that didn't see it at all. And you're just like, what was the coolest thing at E3? Well, it was the object that had been to outer space twice, actually. There were robots and stuff happening inside, but yeah, they actually had a real spaceship there. It was awesome.
And the ESA didn't try to kick out a spaceship, though, did they? It was just Ouya that they gave a hard time to?
Yeah, no, it was just Ouya. I don't know. So I don't know exactly what the logistics of there are. So, like Ouya didn't exist less than a year ago. It was July 9th. July 9th of this year will be our birthday of the launch of the Kickstarter campaign. And so to get into a conference like E3, just like with Comic-Con and PAX, you need two things. You need a lot of money and a lot of time, because they book well in advance, and you have to do all the preparations, of course, and make all sorts of rentals and blah blah blah, which we do not have either at the moment. We're still pretty lean as a company, and so yeah, we thought we would just rent a parking lot and have a little outdoor, accessible to anyone. You didn't have to have a badge to get in. So we had people from the convention, but then also people just from downtown LA that were down. Yeah, I saw some comments on the internet about how oh, who goes to E3 without a badge? And actually a lot of people go because there is so much stuff happening just in the vicinity of the convention center. So
I don't know if I had told you, but I went out to eat with two people Aaron Robinson and Steve Twink, and we were eating happy hour sushi. It was $3 sushi, and behind us were all these muscular, happy men. Some of them with big beards, just screaming and knocking stuff over and hugging, and they're so happy. They all had Ouya shirts. And I was like, is this what the Ouya, behind the scenes crew is all about? This is the guys doing the tech. And I asked them, they're like, no, it was just some party with video games. It was awesome. They're very happy and aggressive. So Ouya invites all.
Oh my! Yeah, it was a pretty funny motley crew we ended up with over at Ouya Park, but I think that's pretty exemplary of Ouya as a whole. So yeah, we had had this empty storage container that we converted into a demo station that had 5 Ouyas, and so showing some games. And we did an open call to our developers, those that were either coming to E3 anyways or who could make the trip to LA, could schedule time to just show off their game at one of the stations. So that was a lot of fun too, because I got to meet a lot more of our developers in person. I tend to do a lot of, I guess, the developer relations ends up being through this, through video chats and stuff, because it's pretty good. But that was really nice to touch base with people. And so we had some student teams and pro industry professionals that have Ouya games, and then also there's an 8-year-old kid that has an Ouya game.
You're kidding.
So it was really cool to like see the spread of developers that we have already,
yeah.
right? And we haven't even done the retail launch, so.
What games were there? Do you recall?
So we had Towerfall by Matt Thorson, which some people are familiar with already because he showed it at PAX Prime previously, which is this cool 4-player local multiplayer like brawler style game, which I really like actually because I don't I'm not typically very good at those games, but I don't know, he has lots of little details, and just the way it's tuned is really fun.
Is that the one that's very like arrow focused? You shoot an arrow
I
and
guess
then
it's,
have to
so
like,
it's not
pick it
so
up?
much like just button mashing and like trying to kill, because it is just one shot death, and then it's over. Then it's like who wins over a series of rounds. So it makes you feel a little bit like you can actually implement some strategy and not just like fly across the screen smashing each other. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just not very good at it. What else did we have? We had Dub Wars, which was like an early. They've been on the platform since the launch of the Kickstarter units. So it was really cool. They're a student team, so it was really cool to meet them. And Luxuria Superba by Tale of Tales, which was also over in the Indiecade section on the floor. So if you got to check that out, that will also be coming to Ouya. So pretty widespread. You Don't Know Jack, which is another one, which they actually, I'm sure you're familiar. It's like,
oh, sure.
Yeah. So they did, it's all new content for Ouya, but then also they created an app called the Jack Pad, because the game is for those people that don't know, it's in the style of a game show. So the interaction with it is really just the 4 buttons on the controller to answer questions that you use to answer questions. And so the Jackpad app just lets you use those 4 buttons, but then you can sync with Ouya. So you don't need to own 4 controllers necessarily. If people just come over to or come over to your house and they have either Android or iOS smartphone or tablet or whatever, then they can play too. So I think that's pretty cool.
iOS tablets and smartphone too. Huh.
What's that?
It's compatible with iOS as well.
Yeah, because you can sync with, I think they use Wi-Fi, but you can do it in general with Ouya. You can use Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to sync with any other device. And I'm just really excited about that possibility as well, as far as open platform and like, I don't know, the new wave of kind of board games and how you can have shared experiences in the living room, but also have these devices with private information. So I was really excited that they kind of took the first step into that space.
Can you move your microphone down a tiny bit?
Sure.
Sometimes it pops hard. Can you say
I do that
guy's throne is nice? Can you?
Oh, that guy's throne is nice?
So much better. That's excellent.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't tell you sooner.
Sorry,
oh, that's okay. I caught it pretty quick in, so no problem. So people, believe it or not, some people might not know who you are. I've seen you on TV. I think you're like, the Mick Jagger practically. And I mean that's
it's all relative, right?
But tell us about who you are, when you got started in development, and kind of walk us through the whole thing. I'm very interested to hear, when you first started with making games.
Yeah, so a lot of people know my work as co-founder and president of Thatgamecompany, and we developed 3 games for PlayStation Network: Flow, Flower, and the most recent one being Journey, which came out early last year. And I co-founded Thatgamecompany in 2006, which I can't believe it was that long ago, with Genova Chen, who I met at the University of Southern California Interactive Media Division. And so I ended up working with him and on a larger student project called Cloud, which, long story short, led to us being able to talk with publishers at a time when going independent wasn't really something you did. Like, indie game development was not a common thing. And we also had student debt, of course, and so we kind of like going the super indie route wasn't an option. So while we were actually pitching to publishers, we were also doing job interviews because we didn't know what was going to happen. And we kind of got this offer from Sony for a 3-game deal. At the same time, Genova got an offer from Maxis to work on Spore with Will Wright.
Oh, wow.
So if you can sort of put yourself in his position, that was 2 really amazing opportunities at the same time.
Yeah.
Because especially in 2006, I mean, like, Spore was like the bomb of game development. Like, they were just sucking up all these amazing developers, and like, it was just really, it seemed like a really great opportunity. And so somehow we managed to convince Sony to let Genova go work on Spore while I started that game company and did Flow with John Edwards and Nick Clark, who were 2 of the first members of that game company. So yeah.
You started a company while having student debt, like right out of what? Where did you get the cojones? How did you work up the guts to do that? That's incredible.
Well, you know what I mean? Part of it was like Sony helped mitigate some of that risk because they were it was a development deal, so they were funding our projects, although it still took a long time to negotiate contracts, and so there was a period of time where it was pretty dodgy financially, and continued to go up and down throughout the course of the process. Yeah, that helped, and it helped us hire people because they knew that money was coming eventually, and we were able to work inside their Sony Santa Monica offices, so that also reduced our costs and kind of helped with some of the pangs of starting a company as far as like understanding how to rent office space and get equipment and all this stuff, and they kind of provided that and helped us get on our feet. Until Journey, which is when we actually moved into our own office space and did all that stuff. So that was part of it. And then the other part was just like, it just seemed like a really awesome opportunity that we should not pass up. And thankfully that turned out to be true, I think.
Did you always have the drive? Yeah, absolutely. But for me, something I question a lot of the guests on the show, one of the things that amazes me a lot about a lot of indie developers is that they have this drive to take all these risks and to put their money, their time, their reputation, their relationships on the line for video games. It's I think we're entering a first generation of people who are actually taking that level of risk with their like adult lives. So is that something you knew you wanted to do for a long time, or did it happened organically as you met Genova and the opportunities started kind of falling into place, or was this something you'd wanted to do for longer than that?
Yeah, it sort of was more the latter. My background was in theater. I went to NYU for undergrad, and then worked in New York for a couple years doing experimental and independent theater works, and I was definitely gravitating towards production in general. I just really love, and still do, the process of, well, seeing something from beginning to end that's just totally unique, but also empowering artists that I think have really interesting voices to bring their works to light and to audiences. And a lot of that stuff was incorporating sort of more experimental theater, was incorporating more and more digital media and interactive media. And so I would become the de facto person in charge of that stuff because I had grown up with a computer always around and sort of just in a dynamic where that was not something that was seen as like scary or other. So I was pretty comfortable with it. And I thought it made sense for me to focus on it, and so I would go to grad school, and that's what led me to the interactive media program, thinking that I would sort of make that my focus, interactive media and performance, and then like come back to New York and do that as my job. And yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so I had been, I guess, side note, like I played video games all growing up, but just never thought about making them until my second semester at USC. Took a course taught by Tracy Fullerton on the history of game design throughout human history and play as culture, and just looking at it that way, it just really became more apparent to me that it was kind of the artistic medium I had always been looking for, as far as incorporating a lot of different disciplines. And that the people, and then I went to the Game Developers Conference that same semester, and really felt met a lot of kindred spirits, which sort of made me feel like I was on the right track, and also that it is just such a new medium, and there's so much possibility, and I like that, just being someone who kind of has always struggled with authority, and like, I don't like being told how to do stuff, so and so I just started trying to sign up for as many game projects as I could to get ramped up on game development, and that's what led me to working on Cloud with Genova.
It's so interesting to hear that it was people that got you really wanting to move forward, as opposed to like one particular game that you thought, oh, I want to emulate this game, and I want my career to be, you know, I'm going to be the next guy who makes Mega Man or something. For you, it sounded like, though you were interested in games growing up, it was finding out what other kind of people make video games, and you think, these are the kind of people I could ally myself with, these are the kind of people I want to help move forward. That's, I don't think that happened all that much 10 years ago, and not in the same way, where people can feel like, I'm just going to get together with these guys and start something, and that can be my career. Was there one particular game that you remember playing thinking, this is the kind of product that shows me that there's a space for me in game development?
I guess what comes to mind initially is actually A Tale of Tales, one of their first projects, called Endless Forest, which was this kind of screensaver experience where you, funny enough, it's like a lot, when you look at it, there's a lot in there that's in Journey, like years later.
Really?
It was somewhat of an anonymous online experience. I actually can't remember off the top of my head if you could see the name of the other players, but you played as this animal. I'm gonna get that. I can't remember if it's, I think, an elk in the forest, and that's kind of what you did. You just like hung out in this beautiful forest online, and you would encounter, when you encountered another animal like you, that was another person. But you know, it was mainly just being around each other, and I think there were some simple interactions. I guess it just sort of was like akin to watching a David Lynch film for the first time in high school, where you're just like, oh my god, this totally blew my mind as far as like what I think about as in cinema, and like similarly, it just sort of totally like opened up my mind as to what it meant to make a game. And I think part of it was because I came to that game through my game design course within USC. So like viewing it through that lens, opening it up to the discussion of like, how is this a game? How is this not a game? Like what is it presenting to the player? How is it communicating its messages? And doing that in a different vocabulary than any other, than most video games, basically. Sort of.
It's interesting that Tale of Tales, great developer, not headhunted yet by the bigger publishers. What do you think? And you got headhunted by a big publisher. That's so great that Sony was like, these guys, we're going to take a shot on them. What do you think it was about you, and what do you think it takes to get big publisher support and faith like that?
It's a good question. I mean, I think part of it is wanting it in the first place. Like, I don't know that Tale of Tales certainly wants to make games that is similar to that game company, can appeal to a wide variety of people and speak different messages and maybe cover themes that are relevant, anyone could relate to. But they don't, I can't speak for them, but in my conversations with them, at least, it seems like they're not really interested. There is some freedom you get when you do it outside of the financial systems of game development, right? Which is what some of my other work has kind of been about, as far as creating different business models for game development to allow different kinds of artists to operate in the ways that they feel most comfortable. Because once you enter into an agreement with a publisher like Sony, it's not just that they like dump a bunch of money at your doorstep and then you get to do your thing. Like, you have to answer to their process, very much so. I mean, this is one of the things I tell a lot of indie developers, is you can't just regard publishers as, yeah, like, oh, they're supposed to give me money and then like back off. It's not going to work that way, probably, and it's also not really advantageous to you either. Like, you really have to consider them as a collaborator. And so in Sony's case, they bring with them a milestone deliverable process that's very kind of specific to how they need to greenlight projects and, you know, do their accounting within the large, you know, company that they are and all that stuff. Which means that you're both in development on this game, but you have these deliverables. You have to deliver builds that are playable and showcase the features of the games, and it impacts your development process, right, in a certain way. So you're either going to be okay with that or not, and it's not for everybody. So that's sort of part of it. And yeah, I don't know. I think Genova and I, it helped that we weren't just trying to sell people on a certain game that was like, oh, the new Mega Man, right? That it was actually, we had the game that we were pitching, but it was under this larger context of what our mission was as developers, and is still. I think both of our missions still is, you know, to create games that evoke different emotions, that show games can be this communicative medium and an artistic entertainment medium.
And that was particularly attractive to Sony, it sounds like. Did you get the sense that they were really on board with what your philosophy was?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really helped that we had a strong advocates internally. John Haidt, who was the director of external production at that time, but has since moved on, and then Shuhei Yoshida, who at the time was head of Sony America and now is heads up Sony Worldwide, I believe.
Yeah.
So he, when we were pitching to Sony, that was right when PlayStation Network was in development. I mean, PlayStation 3 was going to be coming out later in 2006, and they were trying to figure out how they wanted to position this new digital distribution network. And so there were the concepts of like bringing back some of their old properties, allowing them to be downloaded. But Shuhei really saw this opportunity to also use the PlayStation Network as a way to fund smaller, more and maybe more experimental games, but that were still at the high level of quality that PlayStation shoots for in all their projects. But yeah, it could be sold at a lower price because they were cheaper projects and, you know, more on that indie scale.
Yeah, Sony's always been interesting to me in that some of the most interesting games I played, period, were on the PlayStation 1, and it seemed like that was a real home for small, strange games. Like, it's just something like Parappa, which we take for granted today, like flat graphics and a rapping toad talking about the bathroom. I was like, video games blowing up in terms of what it can do. And then PlayStation 2, I felt like they got a little bit more focused on Hollywood-style games, but with PlayStation 3, I couldn't believe what I was seeing at the E3, at Sony's E3 conference, with both PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 just dragging out as many indie developers as they could. And just on the show floor, I ran into Rama Ismail from Flambeer, Jasper Byrne was there, Derek Yu was there, Gaijin Games was there, Nicholas was there. Adam Hart, who's making an indie fighting game called Dive Kick, though he hates it when I call it indie because it's like, they're all just games, dude. Don't put labels on them. I love Adam Hart.
Yeah,
Anyway.
well, it's funny because I was just gonna say, like, it's a different time now, right? Like, indie is something different. I mean, the award season from last year kind of blew it out. Like, especially the GDC awards, which sort of happens at the end of the award season, I think was the sort of demonstrated, like, everything being taken by Journey and The Walking Dead, made by independent studios, right? Like, that sort of shows that it is not necessarily this strict line between AAA development and indie development, and that there's just this a wider array of ways of doing business, and so Sony's showcasing a lot of technically indie developers, but like, they're high class. I mean, these are like professional developers at this point that all have like financially successful titles behind them. So it's a different spectrum now than it used to be.
Absolutely. I see it as there's hobbyist developers who they may not be invested at all. They just are kind of goofing off. And then there's people that are out to just kind of express themselves with experimental games, but money is not an object. But to me, indie is you put money into it. Like, indie is how much money and where the money came from. And to me, they're the ones who I'm the most afraid for most of the time. Like, those are the ones who are like, yeah, I mortgaged my house for this game and I have to survive on it, but they're still, generally speaking, not just chasing after the money. The money is there for their idea, and they're just hoping they get to survive on it. So they're the kind of a starving artist class. But that's my definition. When you hear indie, what do you think these days? What's the definition that resonates with you for it?
I think it's when you're in a position to make decisions about the project you're working on that aren't based on someone else's financial interests. Whether you're leveraging that or not, I think can be, because some independent studios still make very traditional standard games, but they're totally indie. They're doing that by their own choice, I guess you'd say, and no one else's. And then there's the other, like, John Mack's side of it or Tale of Tales side of it, which are, they're both financially independent and then also creating games that are sort of way outside the mainstream.
Sort of
but I'm definitely very passionate about exploring that variety, because the story of, like, the starving artist putting everything on the line and then becoming a millionaire is really exciting, but it's a very dangerous story to put out there and promote as though that's just what will happen to an indie developer. Because it's very unsustainable, and it's very unhealthy, and it can really hurt people. And Matt Gilgenbach from 24 Karat Games, developer of Retrograde, did a fantastic talk at this last year's Independent Game Summit at GDC, which is free on the GDC Vault. So I totally recommend it. I believe it's called Obsessive-Compulsive Design, and it talks about his process, which was very similar to, I think, the stories you hear in movies, in like Indie Game the Movie, sacrificing everything, really struggling through the process, but didn't pay off for him in the end. And that is Aaron Sykson, who's another Indie Fund member, has also done another talk in the past on, he kind of did a survey of the indie community that was going to be at the IGS, so somewhat focused. But in that survey, it sort of was like, I think 20 to 30% of the community like actually was able to become financially independent and self-sustainable off of their projects, and the rest have not. You know, so the story, Matt Gilgenbach's story, is the more common one, but we hear more, of course, about the very romantic, you know, side of putting everything on the line and then becoming a millionaire. And it's just, I actually really love the stories that are in between, where it's like people that do good games, and they make a living, and they make very good livings off of it, you know, and they're self-sustainable and you know, healthy and living full and balanced lives. And you know, I think it's important to celebrate those as well. To me, that's like even more so, because that's a more attainable path for most of us.
Absolutely. It's not quite as bad as acting, I don't think. I think I know more actors who can't get any work at all, but indie game dev is pretty close. So you were at you won the big award? What the heck was that like? That must have been incredible. I'm just I can't help but, you know, we just talked about we shouldn't glorify the Cinderella story too much, but that is a pretty awesome story, though, to be totally winning when, yeah, please tell us what that experience is like.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it didn't feel like maybe a Cinderella because we're not millionaires or anything, but unfortunately, such is the nature of development deals, you do not end up seeing a lot of the money when off the sales of your game. But that was very validating in the way of, you know, I mean, like Genova and I coming from USC and remembering so clearly going to our first GDC and sitting in the audience ourselves and feeling like, oh, we want to do that, and we want to do that with these new types of games. Like we're going to prove that the kind of games we want to make are just as can be on the same playing field as these other games. Like people want to play them just as much, and it's totally possible to make them and not be put in this little corner of like weird niche artsy stuff. And so even when we went into kind of the award season this last year and we were in these categories with the AAA, like with Dishonored and all of the, you know, high production AAA games, like that in and of itself was a victory for us. You know, it was like that was sort of what our goal had been. And then winning some of those categories, including the Game of the Year at the DICE Awards and also at the GDC Awards, was just like totally surreal and just really, it was a nice way to have finished that sort of phase in our lives and that trajectory that we had been on.
And did you know prior to Journey being released that you were going to be moving on from that game company, or was it something you decided after because if you're going to go out on any note, that's like the note to go on. Like, oh, I just changed the industry. See ya, I'm going to try something else now. But I didn't know if that was something that you had in mind all along, or whether it kind of, again, evolved organically as you went forward.
It kind of, again, was, evolved organically, although that's kind of my lifestyle. Things kind of evolve organically, which is nice. But leading up to the completion of Journey, we had so many conversations as managing members of the company, so which was like Genova and myself and Nick and John primarily, and Robin and Martin as well. Martin, who had also joined us at the beginning during Flow, and then Robin Haneke, who was producer on Journey. And we were having all these conversations about what was next, because that was the end of our 3-game deal with Sony. So we weren't going to be tethered to the PlayStation platform. It was really just totally open-ended. And it brought a lot of conversations about what we had learned during this process, what we wanted to take from it, what we did not want to take from it. And, you know, at the end of the day, like, it had been 6 years that we've been working together, which is a long time for anyone who's been in a long-term relationship. You know, you may be fortunate enough. It's like the person you marry is the person that it's like fortunate enough that you are growing together. But for the most part, I found, at least in my experience in dating, was like when you notice that you were growing in different ways, or you just weren't growing at the same, you weren't growing together. You know, you were growing apart or just at different paces, and like, and that's sort of what I think fundamentally happened with us. It was just we were growing in different directions, and it didn't make sense to like try and, as much as we love the product of what our collaborations had led to, it didn't make sense to continue to like force ourselves to try and bring our different interests and styles, in part because the three games were, I'm hesitating to say successful because we didn't know necessarily that Journey was going to be successful before it launched, but it was successful in the way of like we knew that we had accomplished the thing we set out to in Journey and in Flow and in Flower, and so because of that, it felt like it was a really good moment for us to sort of take that and then and like leverage it into like whatever it is we wanted to do next. And ultimately, Genova and John and Nick found that they were still very much aligned, or more aligned even than when we had begun, and so they continued on with that game company and have since been kind of rebuilding it and like the stuff that they wanted to do, and the rest of us have kind of scattered and doing different stuff. And you probably saw Matt Nava, who's the art director on Journey. He has started his own company, so they're working on a new project, and Robin and Martin started their own company called Phenomena, which just recently announced a collaboration with Keita Takahashi, the lead designer on, or the creative director of Katamari Damacy and Nobi Nobi Boy. So we're all like going and planting seeds in different places, and maybe one day we'll bring the band back together. That's what I would like.
Yeah, that would be
do a reunion tour.
I think people would love that, and it is great that it's nice to have all that talent condensed in one place, but to spread it around and to everyone have their solo projects for whatever length of time is a wonderful thing to see. I don't know how comfortable you would be in talking about what it might, if anything, was going on in terms of working with Sony or all that pressure and all that money, because I can't help but guess. I've heard about the final stages of developing Journey, how you guys had to put your own money into it and were staying in the office until 24 hours, 48 hours at a time. For me, that would be something that would be hard for me to want to jump right back into after a project like Journey. So that was my guess, was that maybe that development atmosphere was something that caused that game company to want to move in different directions. But what was it? What made you? Was there a moment you remember thinking, "No, I'm going to move on to something else, and this is what I want to do after Journey"?
It was actually more that I knew that it was a good time. Like, it was better to part ways then than getting involved in another project and having to transition out of that and bring someone in to replace me, or whatever it had played out. It's just much cleaner when you're at the end of the project and about to start another one. So I knew that part before I knew what was going to happen next part, and I definitely took a good amount of time was just resting, recovering, and processing. I feel like I've done some really strong talks since then, because I more so even than when I was during that process, because I actually had this period of time to really think about what I had gone through and learned and taken away from the experience of it. And I continued work with, so one thing that hasn't come up in our conversation is also co-founding the Indie Fund, which is an angel investment fund with a number of other independent developers, including Ron Carmel and Kyle Gabler from 2D Boy and Jonathan Blow and Nathan Vella from Capybara, and among others. And so we had been doing this work in creating a fund to help independent developers get and stay financially independent, and playing around with different business models for that, and then also creating stuff on my own and working on some personal projects. And like I've always been half creative, half business. But I don't know, around like the fall, I started feeling like, okay, I'm kind of ready to throw myself back into something. And I kind of felt like my personal trajectory was moving along, impacting the industry through business models, through its business models. And so then like wanting to be in a position where I could learn more about that and understand more about why the current business models are the way they are, and like how can we change them. And totally thinking that, okay, now I'm probably going to like join a VC investment firm or a Sony or a Microsoft, you know, go work within the system to like understand it more. And then I was introduced to Julie Ehrman, who was looking for someone to head up developer relations and content acquisition with Ouya. And it was just the perfect match because they were kind of founded on a similar principle as well, to really shake up the business model of distributing games in the living room. And yeah, so I went with that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you did, and I think a lot of people are. Ouya was something I was excited about in concept, but when I heard you joined on, that's when I got like excited about it in practice. I'm like, she's gonna.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, it's absolutely true, and everyone I've talked to, all those developers at Sony who I bumped into, they were like, "Oh yeah, Ouya, Kellee's company. That's a good company. Well, we're gonna end up with that." So you just like, to a lot of people, you are Ouya, and that's not such a bad thing. How's it been going with Ouya since you started? Very interested to hear how that whole process has been, because I don't think anything like this has ever been done before.
Yeah.
Kickstarted home console, which I can't wait to get one of, by the way. But yes, tell us how that's been.
It's been a crazy roller coaster. It's awesome. Julie Ehrman, if you've seen her talk or met her, like her energy is like that all the time, and it's really inspiring. And that's what, sort of going back to what we were talking about earlier about making decisions about being in the industry based on wanting to work with certain people. That was a big motivator for me working with Ouya. And Julie just is that kind of person that you're like, whatever it is you're doing, think I'm pretty signed on for that. Like, that sounds really exciting because she just really set a tone of rallying people around this disruptive technology that's being created, and then just sort of saying, like, I'm going to hire smart people and get out their way. And it's a really fun environment, almost Aaron Sorkin-like at times, like just heated debates because everyone's very passionate. But it's really about debating to find the right answer. So we'll sort of look at issues from every side and then figure out what the right direction to go in is and go with that, or ultimately default to the person who's in charge of making that decision because they're the smartest person about that. So that's been really fun to work in. Yeah, what else? I'm kind of rambling about Ouya now, but
no, that's good.
It's been it's like, yeah. I think some people don't know, it's like so the whole company is like less than 40 people launching a console. So if you think about, yeah, like what you probably saw of, you know, the press conferences that Sony and Microsoft put on, like we're this teeny little fraction of that, and it's cool because it means it's like it is really intense and crazy at times, but it's like we're really nimble, right? Like we can sort of see what if there's a better way to do something than we're doing it right now, then we can like switch tomorrow because there's not a huge hierarchical organization that we're navigating, and it's a pretty flat company. So I don't know. I just think like all those things like makes it really was why I signed on, because I want to see them succeed. Basically, I want to see them happen because I think they are offering this really interesting alternative. And when you do that in any business model, it changes the competitive landscape, right? Like if Ouya can be successful at what they're doing and what they're offering to developers, then it will make the other players, force them to change their fundamental policies, some of which I think still are like very, very old and stagnant and do not address the needs of development today as it's changed so much.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's you talk about Ouya in a way that sounds similar to the way you talked about that game company and Journey and Flow and Flower, and that you wanted to make something that showed people this is a way you can do it. It may not be, it's not the only way, but this is another way you can do things, and to open your thoughts outside of the box. I just can't wait
there's
to
talking
it.
about it and there's doing it, and we try and do both, like always both at the same time. Genova and I as well, they both have that sort of ethos. They're trying to inspire other people, but you got to sort of prove it, right, as you go.
Man, can't be easy, but people are hungry for a new way of doing consoles, and people are they've had their fill of the old way, and I've heard nothing but this is the last generation of consoles. That's what everybody I've talked to at E3 has said. Even people working at some of these companies are like, yeah, consoles were cool, right? But that people don't need them anymore, not for $500, $600, not when they can play games on their phones that are really good games a lot of the time. So to open to set the price low and open up the net wide could be the way to move consoles forward. I sure hope it is. That's the kind of console I want anyway. All these questions happened. Do you have any questions?
Yeah,
Kellee?
I was just noticing.
Yeah, they pop up like that. It's startling. Sermon asks, what's your opinion on the slew of attachable controllers for mobile phones? Yeah, there are a lot of those coming out.
Yeah, they're kind of weird, right? I don't know. Like, I don't know if I would play with that. I don't know how, like, I mean, I guess I would, like, prop up my tablet, like, stand it up, and then play with a controller, but, I don't know, to me, it's like, and maybe it's just because of the generation of gaming that I grew up in, it's like, the controller, to me, is so synonymous with a living room. Like sitting back and interacting with the television in this way. So, but I totally caveat that with it. It's just like that's how I was raised in gaming, and like kids these days, I don't know. Like it's funny to see what. It's always fascinating to see like how they shake things up. So, it'll be interesting to see if they latch onto this or yeah, I don't know. I just can't like imagine how it's comfortable or like engaging to interact with my phone that way.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine people because the target is convenience. That's what people are after with all their products these days, and to throw one on there. It could be hot for the truly dedicated phone gamer, but for the most part, I think it'll get tossed. Flip Danger Doom asks, what was the last day at, I think he means GDC, but he typed TGC. Is there a TGC?
Company?
Oh no, maybe it's Thatgamecompany.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Sinistar, and you sound so cordial for a change. That's nice. Can you walk us through that day? Was there cake at Thatgamecompany on your last day?
On the last day, I think most of us were so exhausted that we didn't even go into the office. It was definitely one of the things we struggled with at the time, and I think the new sort of studio manager person they have, Sunny, is better at this than we were, which is like celebrations and stuff. We were always terrible at, which is a terrible thing for a company. Just by the way, you should like if you are not a celebratory person, you should just pretend like you are for the sake of your team because it's nice to mark time and have those moments, but we were kind of bad at it, so I think it was pretty uneventful.
And the way you talk about them, I don't get any tone of finality for your relationship with the people there. You've talked about Genova multiple times in this conversation, and always with a smile on your face, so I don't get the sense that you felt like your relationship with them ended, just rather the direction of your career changed for as long as you wanted to have changed. Yeah. So that's nice. That's always sad when people have that sense of finality about their relationships, but Seems like you still have them. Johnny Viral.
Games industry is too small for that. By the way,
Yeah, true.
for anyone
It's
else
true.
out there entering in development, like, try not to burn a whole lot of bridges, because yeah, it's a small industry, and so everyone comes back. I try to operate with respect and integrity in all things. So
absolutely, I haven't said a bad thing about anybody or anything as of yet, and I wouldn't dare fish to try. But after the show, maybe you'll tell me something you don't like. That'd be interesting. Johnny Viral asks, what do you think when you hear a publisher tell a dev that a female lead will not sell, when we have seen female leads work just fine in the game industry and are among some of the most iconic characters in game history? I don't know if you'd heard this, but Remember Me is a game, I think, from a French developer, published by Capcom, and they pitched it. It's like a ambiguous race female lead, and they were told, like, guys don't want to watch a female that they're playing as kiss a guy because it's going to make them feel like they're guy kissing, and then they're going to quit the game. Like, these completely archaic, treating the audience as though they couldn't tolerate anything other than what's the opposite of empathy? Just like having a character that is you, and if it's different from you in any way, they won't be able to, like, relate with them at all. I was really sad and worried when I heard that stuff. But
yeah.
What do you make of it when you hear that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of BS, right? Like, especially because you can focus test. If you're a larger company, you can focus test extensively. So, like, you could have data that supports one reason or another. So there's no reason to, like, make a statement like that that's just totally unfounded on anything. Yeah, it is unfortunate, I think.
But your games in particular have shown people that you can relate with an amoeba or some
or wind.
petals.
Yeah.
The audience as though they can't relate with things unless they're identical to them. And Journey, in particular, showed people there's so many different ways to relate with someone, non-verbally or just empathetically through visually, or sharing the same space with them can be enough to make you feel like a deep connection with someone that you've never met and maybe never will meet any other way. So, I don't know. It's worrisome to me that people didn't notice that. With all of Journey's success, some people probably just thought, oh yeah, weird games with sand are hot right now, and just, like, looked at only the surface things and not the underlying reasons why it was so unique and so interesting. Did you want to talk at all about its gender? Is something I usually don't bring up unless the guest does, because I feel terrible treating people like that's one of the more interesting things about them is what their gender happens to be. But you do stand out as one of the biggest names in the industry who also happens to be...
Well, only because you brought it up. We'll like really freak your audience out now. So because I have something that's like... So I am a pregnant developer right now, which I feel like puts me in an uber minority at the moment.
Yeah.
How is that really, like, quite crazy and exhausting. So I'm 6 months pregnant now, and I would say it is, like, well, I mean, a lot of stuff has happened this last year as far as, like, the conversation around gender in games and the games industry, which is, I mean, to me, like, I've really, like, changed a lot. Whoops, I'm, like, having to readjust now. Okay, I've changed my own perspective on it as far as feeling like I need to speak to it more, or not be afraid to speak to it, I guess, when I'm asked. But certainly being pregnant is, like, a whole other level of recognizing, like, the strange biological from a career standpoint, like, the limitations it can put on. Because, like, for instance, like, my energy level is very finite, and, like, it's can be really important as an independent developer, especially to attend lots of events, or you're involved in multiple projects, or, you know, you need to, like, keep these connections going. And, like, right now I have, like, kind of a limited window in my day that, like I can do a lot of that stuff. And so how do I manage to, you know, continue through this process and both launch a console and a human being at the same time? It's been a very interesting challenge.
No kidding. Yeah. What aren't you doing? That's incredible. Have you ever had any experiences where you feel like your gender impacted you either way in terms of how you were treated by other people in the industry, or trying to, you know, pitch a game, or however it may have come to be? Has it been much of a factor?
I mean, as far as gender by itself, mainly it's been like I get recognized in a room a lot faster, I would say. I get remembered in crowds of people, especially early in my career. That was very helpful. Genova and I always felt like in pitch sessions, sometimes there'd be the person trusts me more as being white, maybe the white person, or just like a white woman in the room. They would respect me more. And then in other situations, like Genova being the Asian guy talking about video games would get more respect. So that we like made a good pair that way. But it was something that we noticed, like people treated us differently in different situations, depending on the scenario. But I think for me, it's been more manifest like in a general culture way, like the way so much game development is really driven by alpha male, even though like an alpha male perspective on the world and work environment. So a lot of like might is right. If you're the person like putting more hours in the office, then you're the one who should make the decision because that's like what matters. And having conversations involving a lot of confrontation or like necessitating people to be alpha about their opinions, and that can apply to the women and the men in our industry, and so that's to me where I've noticed it a lot more as far as like game development really kind of fitting around one culture, but in order to make a wider variety of games, like you need to be able to accommodate personalities that are more, are anything else other than that. Whether that's more introverted or creative personalities, especially, can really be more wandering, or like in their work process. They're not always gonna be ready to like defend their perspective. These are just sort of like tiny examples, but yeah, that's kind of where I've seen it more.
That's so interesting, because from the outside looking in, I see so much just who are these products made for, and you can kind of guess who made a product based on who their product is made for. People usually want to make things that they would enjoy on their own, and it is a very alpha male culture. Almost every CEO I saw was male. There's a lot of numbers out now saying that a lot of women are playing video games more so than men. But when you go to E3, that's not the ratio at all. I bumped into Jane Jensen, who developed some of the King's Quest games, and she was like one woman surrounded by like 50 guys all talking to her about King's Quest, which was great. But her voice was so kind of quiet compared to, not for her lack of speaking, but just she was alone in that so frequently. So that makes a lot of sense that the business decisions, too, are influenced by the alpha male culture. And you are sneaking or loudly presenting a different way of doing it. You've gotten into it, and thank God for that, because that's what indies offer me, is not only different perspective in terms of how the game was made or why the game was made or who the game was made for, but just the kind of people who are making them are not the kind that would necessarily rise up the ranks in like a Nintendo or whatnot. They never get the chance to, but the way games are made now, everybody can do it on the Ouya, by the way.
Even an 8-year-old. One.
That's so great. What's the 8-year-old's game like? I meant to ask you.
So I actually haven't played it yet because I missed him when he came to demo it, and it's not available yet. It'll probably come hopefully later this month, but it's I know it's a space game. That's about some astronaut rescue. Yeah.
Sounds adorable. Sounds worth my $5 at the very least.
Hopefully I'll be doing an interview with him, actually, because I do my own vlog series for Ouya called Pixel by Pixel, which is on YouTube, Pixel X Pixel, in which I interview our developers and like get to know more, so people can get to know more about their process and stuff. So I definitely want to have him on. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to that. Did you ever have the Kitty Loves Robot or Robot Loves Kitty people on there? They're one of my favorite Ouya developers.
Oh no, but I'll ask them.
Yeah, they're making Legend of Dungeon, and they're very charming folks. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, neato. Mr. Chad asks, it seems there's a bunch of designers with academic backgrounds in that game company, namely Genova, Robin, and yourself. Do you think this background is reflected in your design practice?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a vocabulary you get in academia, you know, having practice in talking about games and why one thing makes you feel a certain way really informs your conversation as a developer and a development team. But I think also the exposure to how other disciplines or other fields of work can inform game development as well. I mean, Genova, of course, Journey was very much inspired by Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which is a archetype of story structure that we learned at USC, and also psychology, the psychology of happiness and flow theory, and referencing film and art and you know other fields other than just other games that have been made. I think that is something you can get a lot of that perspective from academia, certainly.
Yeah, outside of the power fantasy bubble, people hate it when I throw around power fantasy as though there's anything to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be ashamed of to love power fantasies.
Yeah, no, I played some great power fantasy games. Yeah, yeah. That's what I always said. Like, I like my fair share of like competitive, you know, dredging up, leveling up kind of games. It's just that we always wanted something different, you know, variety as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Some of the secret That Game Company games on the Journey disc had some of that leveling up and murdering.
Oh, yeah, right. It's like other companies would do game jams to do weird experimental games, but our game jams would be about doing like really traditional mechanics because we didn't get to do that in our day-to-day jobs. And like our day-to-day jobs were always like trying to solve these hard problems, like how do you make someone feel empathy in an online game or like whatever. So it's like, oh, let's just do a jam on killing zombies. Like that would be great. That feels good.
And are you working on more games now? Or is the whole forming a human being and launching a console thing and taking up
yes to both. I have games. I have a game project cooking in the background, but yeah, other things have taken time lately. But I hope that it will, continue. So then, I don't know. It's still like an itch that I like to scratch for sure. I like being in that creative space, getting out of the business space, and it also helps me relate to the developers I work with. You know, keeping my own development practice helps me understand where they're coming from in our decisions about business development in Ouya or Indie Fund or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't talk much about Indie Fund. I've talked about it on the show before, but I don't know where that money comes from. I've been meaning to ask somebody. How do you guys...
I think I didn't plug it in my laptop and it's about to die. Hold on.
Oh,
Let me make sure it doesn't die on us here. Okay. Where does the money come from?
Yeah.
So it's an angel investment fund, which means it comes from us. Some more than others, you can imagine. Some of them, yeah, had more successful titles, but yeah. So it's our own money. We're literally putting our money where our mouth is.
Wow, thank you for doing that. Is there any way you could, and stop me if you've done this already and I'm just uninformed on it, but there's a similar fund for comic book artists and writer, but they sell comics once a year to kind of replenish the fund, so independent comics artists can, get health insurance or survive if there's a disaster or something along those lines. So I wonder about game jams. I would make a game for you. I would learn how to make a game just for you to fund your thing, and I think a lot of other people would too. It'd be great.
That's interesting. So, like selling the game jams, or like selling participation in it?
Yeah, I would do like a $5 bundle of like 20 games. I would not only would I make a game, but then I would buy the game afterwards in a heartbeat to help support that and just get word out that the thing exists, because I was ignorant to its existence until I think late last year when one of the guests on the show told me about it. It's not the kind of thing, sadly, that the big game blogs are hot to talk about as much as maybe they should. So
yeah, well, and it is one of those things that, like, we sometimes feel like, yeah, we could be doing a better job messaging it, but at the same time, it's doing pretty well. Like, we're financially sustainable, and so we feel like, and we're all also developers, ourselves. So that's been the other challenge of it, is like we have no shortage of ideas on how to grow it, and we just recently at Horizons announced that we did a partnership with other industry professionals as well, who will be named at a later date, to invest into new Double Fine games. So that was sort of a big step, because it's a much larger fund than we've done in the past. And but the challenge is with any of those things of like, oh, we should do this other thing, is like all of us have like other jobs too. So we always have to be mindful of the fact that we have limited bandwidth. But certainly, like, one of the ways we could grow is having someone join that full-time manages the fund, and that may be, who knows, maybe another step in the future. Or we really hope to work to make ourselves obsolete, and that other people, like yourself, you could start your own fund based on the fact that we've done it.
Yeah, maybe I should, if I just didn't have 20 jobs at the moment.
Yeah,
so
exactly, right? That's the rub.
Oh, and I ignored other questions. What a jerk. Rafa Fritas asks, can you discuss your friendship with Phenomena? What is your role? Phenomena. Yeah. Sorry, I pronounced it wrong. That is, you mentioned them earlier. What is your role as an advisor to Phenomena?
Just as an advisor, really. Robin usually taps on me for advice around business development, and also marketing and messaging, because that's a lot of what I did with that game company as well, is how do you take the maybe weird esoteric concepts of an experimental game but present them in a way that is very relatable and palatable to anybody, including the people that traditionally play power fantasy games, whatever. Like, how do you make it relate to them? Which is something that I guess is part of that whole passion around like bringing unique voices to light and finding their audience. I think a lot of it is sometimes just messaging, and that the artists don't know necessarily how relatable they actually are. Like how, no, if you just say it, you don't have to lie, you don't have to, sure, some people feel like marketing and PR is about lying in some way, and I don't feel that way. I feel like you can be very honest and truth, and especially in games, I think we as gamers respond so much to that. Like, we love seeing when the developers we love are just like honest about who they are and what they love. So yeah,
but they get to do that so infrequently, sadly, because from my perspective anyway, the big developers, the big publishers often don't really understand the appeal of their own product which causes them to be afraid, like, maybe this thing sucks because I don't even understand why you would play a Call of Duty. I don't know. So then they, with that fear, cause them to be afraid of anyone in the company talking about the product in any way that they don't have total control over. And that's why this show kind of exists, because it's like the one place I could find where I could weekly get someone who makes video games to talk about it, because largely it's not something that's not something that big publishers want too much. You're one of the biggest names to appear on the show, not because other guests didn't want to be on the show from bigger studios, but they're like, I can't. If I say one thing wrong in that hour and a half, that's my job. So sorry. Type me up an interview. I'll run it through, the meat grinder and have 30 people look at it before I answer any of your questions. But a live stream talk show is just kind of an impossibility for them. Another thing that should change.
It's true. No, it's true, and it's unfortunate because then we don't. I mean, I think the rise of indie development has led to a rise in transparency around game development because of that. Because you have people who don't have to answer to anyone else or worry about that. But it comes from the other side too. It's like I'm sure Dtoid is no stranger to like the catchy headline that gets links to your website, right? And like that comes from some person on an interview like this. They lower their guard and they say this one statement that's like then pulled out of context, and Chris Hecker becomes the person that like hates the Wii or like whatever it was. Genova has had some moments like that too. I remember there was some interview. He always had like some moments like that. I think he never. Especially as we were going to Journey, because we were starting to tip over into that place of like becoming so successful that people were like trying to find us a way, waiting for us to like mess up, right? Or waiting for us to like, the tide was kind of turning in that way. So you had to be more careful during interviews, which it sucks, but.
That's interesting. So you noticed a point where you went from being someone that people weren't threatened by or didn't see as kind of a potential bait for controversy, and as you got larger, you had to keep an eye out more for maybe being taken out of context or maybe being lured into something that would be used to just drive hits for a website?
Yeah. I mean, even now, right, it's like if I say something about Sony or Microsoft, like that would be really big news if I were say anything that sounded anything remotely like I didn't love them completely, and it sucks because it's also like your job. It is your job, right? Like even whether you're internal or an independent studio, like if you speak ill of Microsoft, which some developers in the last year have come out, talking about deals that have gone wrong or whatever, but that's not an easy thing to do because that you're probably burning a bridge there, right? And not to say that they shouldn't do it, because again, it's like it's good to bring the light of day to these issues. It's good to have people within the industry know about them, but then it becomes this big news item, and it's tough. It's a tough line to walk.
Absolutely. I can imagine, because part of the reason you do things the way you do is because you want to be true to yourself and say exactly what you want to say without self-editing, but at the same token, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, nor would you want to burn yourself in the process and be taken out of context and have people misinterpret you. So I find that a lot of game developers, for better or worse, are very controlling when it comes to their message, and I've always taken that to be because they have total control over their game design, and that it was attracted to them for a reason. So to lose control over your message by inviting a conversation with a stranger like me, and who knows what I'll do to a conversation later. So I don't know if I thank you for trusting me to be on the show at all. I promise to do right by you.
I think more games journalists should do that.
Oh,
thank you for trusting me. I think that would be a good way to end every interview. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to fake pitch a game to you and see how you advise me on selling it, because that's very interesting. And I think a lot of people watching the show are probably, a lot of game developers watch the show, and they're hoping to figure out how to do what you did. A lot of it, I assume, was being in the right place at the right time, just having the right kind of energy and the right kind of team. But there's still definitely a lot to be said, actually, for your way of thinking that got you where you were. So if I pitch a game to you, will you help me figure out how to sell it?
Sure. Will you try that?
Okay. Yeah, all right. So I've wanted to make a game for a while. I love Pokemon. I'll tell you that right now. But for me, Pokemon is fun because I'm collecting little character designs. So for me, I've always seen Pokemon as just like an art collecting game. And I like collecting art too. So for me, they're one and the same. I don't care about the story, graphics, man, whatever. But I love those cute little bastards. They're adorable. So if I wanted to make a game where I'm collecting like Picassos and Gogons and all that sort of stuff, how would I market that? How would I market my art collecting turn-based battle RPG?
Okay, so you're still battling like Picassos against other like,
Sure. Like Dolly, Joseph Campbell, and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. Dolly would be strong against, like, oh, I don't know, Renaissance type.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool. I like this idea. You know, I think it's interesting. Like, just riffing on the concept is that I heard a lot of stories about teenagers learning about Renaissance art through Assassin's Creed 2, because there's that collection. There is a collection mini game or like B story throughout, and if you're one of those players that likes that needs to like fulfill all of the little missions in every game, like you are going to end up being this collector of Renaissance art, and then when it goes into your collection, like you can read about the artist and like learn about the painting and stuff, and so it's cool. And I feel like as a whole is like not talked about a lot is Assassin's Creed 2, of like it feels like they kind of snuck in like a lot of the like educational stuff into this like larger world game, which is pretty cool. So I think it's something to the point. It's like I think that shows that this is actually there's the potential here to have confidence in this concept as like being something that could be engaging to people. I mean, because those artists have really fantastic stories, and incorporating that somehow into the way maybe the battles happen, like some aspect of Picasso's history, or his story is like translates into a combat style that you would have using a Picasso painting. It's like a cool way
like
to
grumpy womanizing moves or something like that. Because he was a grumpy womanizer.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like and you make a strong point in that. I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but people felt better about themselves after playing Assassin's Creed 2, because though it's a kind of a romp and a fantasy, it's also technically making you smarter afterwards. And I feel like we're in an age where a lot of people don't want to feel like they wasted any of their time, especially playing video games. They want to come out of it feeling a little better about themselves or like they gained something afterwards. So maybe I could make a art collecting turn-based RPG battle that makes people feel smart afterwards.
Well, you make it look nice. I think that'll like in and of itself. I feel like that's what, especially as I'm looking at some of the new and raw content of this early phase of Ouya. What I'm advising developers to do is that a lot of people, I think, because it's easy from an art perspective, possibly, it's very easy to set things in outer space, and a lot of the middleware engines have certain templates of spacecraft or environments that look similar to one another and have this like black, blue, and purple color palette. And one of the biggest challenges that you have just in game development as a whole is like, how do you get that first moment you get someone to come just even look at your game, whether it's at the show or on the digital distribution channel of your choice. You know, think about when you're flipping through like any sort of downloadable game store, you know, it is the graphic initially, that image that pops out at you. And so if your game is exploring some kind of mechanic that could actually be set anywhere, like a collection battle mechanic, right? That fundamentally, you can set that anywhere. It can be about anything. It can be any character. So pick something different, you know, pick something with a neon orange palette, you know, whatever. Like, that immediately will make it stand out so much and get you noticed. And so then you've like already crossed a huge hurdle. And Thatgamecompany games are all examples of this. I mean, from the very first one, Cloud, when we were at the student showcase at Independent Game Festival, like, you looked at student projects and there were a lot of black and grays and browns, and then there was Cloud, which just had this sky blue palette, right? And it got, you know, you just looked across it and like that was the game that stood out visually. So it is it's really important.
Absolutely. You're so good at this. You took what it could be the least marketable game idea ever, pitting Picasso versus Salvador Dali.
Let's go.
You're super nice, Kelly. Thank you for saying that. We do have more questions, though. I'm being a dink for ignoring them. Orpheum asks, do you see any dramatic shifts in mainstream games in the upcoming future? Yes, this is something I meant to ask you as well, but just so you know my perspective, like you said, when I saw Journey and Walking Dead winning all these awards, I'm like, that was much more of a game changer than any sort of technological advancement we'll be seeing anytime soon. And that was like the CD-ROM moment for us. It's like, people get that video games are for more than one demographic now. But where do you think, where do you hope, and where do you think things are going to moving from here?
Yeah. If you saw the Halo 5 trailer, you know, there were a lot of jokes about how that looked like a high-budget version of Journey at the beginning, right? You have the guy in the robe and the desert.
Even
and
at the
like
hood
this like thing that popped out of the sand that looked like an early war machine that we had in Journey, like, comes out.
Really?
And I thought, yeah, that would be so awesome, like, if we were ever able to make a game like Journey at that scale. Like, it does make a difference, right? Like, sometimes that super hyper-realistic, like, immersive environment, it really feels amazing. And it would be amazing to be able to apply that to different emotional contexts. But I don't know if that's going to happen. Like, those games are really expensive to make. And earlier this year, I got to go to my very first super secret, like, executive VIP conference where, like, everything was off the grid, and so everyone was sharing stuff, and it was awesome. And I learned a lot from people who've been in the industry a long time. And, like, the truth is, right now still, like, those hardcore gamers that go after the deep, like, longer experience power fantasies, like, even in the free-to-play space, which has been dominated by kind of women and casual players for a while, like, they spend more money. They just spend more money. And that's really stuck with me. How do we, like, as long as that's true, then that's where the large budget game making is going to go, certainly. So if you are not into those types of games, spend more money on the other kinds of games that you love, because that is like, fundamentally, it's like you vote with your dollar, and we all do.
Sure.
And we can find these different sustainable ways of making alternative video games, but, like, the expensive big budget games, like, you gotta know that you're gonna get money back on them, right? So you have to serve the audience is going to spend the most money on them. I don't know. At the same time, like, it's such a crowded marketplace. I mean, that was one of the fundamental tenets of that game company, why we wanted to do, one of the reasons we wanted to do this, the sort of explore different emotions in games, was like, yes, it's true those people spend the most money, but it's not unlimited money in the year. And so when you have a lot of players competing for that like same stack of cash, it gets harder and harder. So like another business decision is to like, oh, well, I'm just not even going to try and compete with those people. Like I'm going to go after this other group of people and their money instead. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the smaller, thinking long term, the smaller you narrow your demographic that you're trying to catch, the more you cast everyone away, and you never have the opportunity to grow the industry as a whole, and you get year-over-year shrinking, which I'm always afraid is going to happen, but less so these days. Again, Sony really encouraged me with showing off Octodad, and there's so many free games on the Vita as well. It's really great to see that. Frobisher Says, it's old now, but that was one of my favorite free Vita games. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Yeah, so you have a Vita.
Yeah, I do. I do have a Vita. It took me a while to get one, but I had to break down eventually.
Oh, why did you? Was it like you just had to break down because you needed to play games on it, or?
Yeah, I've yet to actually have to, but I felt like I was missing out on a big part of where a lot of my favorite developers were going. Having Vlambeer on here, and then Jasper Byrne is putting Lone Survivor on there. Just so many experiences that are well suited to it that I can't get anywhere else, or if I buy them on PS3, I just get them on the Vita anyway. So it feels like I've got all these free games just kind of sitting on my hard drive. Yeah, so I broke down, got one. I think it was worth it. I'm being a jerk though. I'm ignoring questions again. We have 2 minutes. Mr. CH4D, Mr. Chad. Internet type. My mistake.
Chad's so clever.
Mr. Chad says, how do you let go of roles you have or play within the industry, like That Game Company or Ouya, to make way for fresh voices or causes? I believe that means how do you kind of stop what you did, let go of things that you know worked for you, and are willing to take risks on all new things that might not be successful? You could have made Journey too. Absolutely you could have, and probably gotten a lot more money than you did the first time around. You could have thrown your weight around and just said, yeah, Journey Forever, sequel coming out now. And yet you stopped and went in a whole new direction. So how do you do that mentally? I don't know how you did that.
I mean, part of it is just feeling like it's not in my DNA, and it wasn't in the people at That Game Company and their DNA either, of just like when it came to the next project, I'm the type of person that is thinking about, okay, what's the next challenge for me? Like, okay, I did that. Like, what's the next thing? What's the next mountain to climb? And even after leaving That Game Company, I had a few opportunities to partner up with other developers to start a new studio. But I had just done that at That Game Company, right? And that was another thing. It was like, I know I could do that, and I know I could do it way better because I've learned so much of That Game Company, and I like do all these things differently. But it didn't feel. It felt like I would be going back instead of moving forward to like the next challenge. So that's part of it, and then the other half is that things like That Game. Things like That Game Company, but things also like Journey or Flower, like, happen because you do throw yourself off a cliff. Like, it feels very much like that, and it's scary, and you feel like you're putting everything on the line, whether you're doing it financially or not. It's scary to put yourself out there and do something different and put your name on it. But that's how really great things happen. So it's sort of necessary to go through that process, and over time you can sort of trust yourself more through it. Like, now when I have that feeling, like, I know I've okayed it a few times and landed safely, and so like I can have a little bit more faith in myself, but it's still pretty terrifying every time.
Yeah. So what do you do with that? I mean, the fear man, just having a baby is scary, let alone like starting a console. What do you do with that fear? How do you manage to channel it and make it work for you the way that you
You surround yourself with really good people. Like that helps a lot. You exercise and eat well, honestly. Like that has come up in multiple conversations of the subject within the indie game development community. Like I'm not just saying that as a soon-to-be mother or anything. Like it really makes a difference because it can be such an emotionally volatile experience. Like you want to maintain at least good health. Like helps your mind grapple with that and have energy, you know, to be able to face each challenge as it comes. And have really good friends, and it doesn't have to be a whole large group of them, like, but know who they are. And included in that are advisors and mentors, you know, I think games industry, one of the things I love about it is that there are so many people willing to advise for free, you know, to help a fellow developer out. So as you're going through, I've had people that I picked up at USC, like guest lecturers or whatever, that are still people I call on, maybe not that often, but like when I have a certain problem or certain challenge that I'm facing and I just don't know how to solve it, I know to call them, and like they will help me think through it.
Well, it's another thing that, and I hate to stereotype, but a lot of game developers I've met are people attracted to the game industry in general. It's because actual social interaction is not a strength of theirs or something that they have a lot of fear around. So they kind of bury themselves in this other way of connecting to people through games. But it sounds like taking care of yourself physically and mentally and being willing to open up to other people and connect with people is what can get you through this sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I can't think of any counter example to that. Like you have to, even if it's just opening yourself up to one or two people that you keep close to you, it's really vital. And I feel like I've seen a lot of people fail when they don't. They try and just trudge through by themselves, and yeah, it's not good.
And you learned pretty early on in theater that putting yourself out there with the support of everyone that you're working with, you can get through anything as long as you have a troupe that you're working with and you're all in it together. And
yeah.
Did you ever act? Did you act on stage?
I did, and I did improv as well, which was terrifying. Yeah, I kind of decided, like, when I was 21 or 22, I decided that, like, whatever in a myriad of decisions that I had, or like any given day, if there was like a choice between different things to do or jobs to take or whatever, like whichever was the one that made me most nervous and most afraid was the one that I was going to do. And it's a really good way to like grow yourself and challenge yourself. So, yeah, I think that definitely helped me a lot, and certainly like propelled me in a totally different trajectory of life than I think I would have otherwise.
Well, thank God for that. I'm glad you did that. I'm glad you grab onto things that make you afraid and do them anyway, because that's why we have some awesome video games that you made. And I guess that's the end of the show. Rats. They can follow you on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle again?
Kellee San, Kell. Well, I guess I can type it in here too. KELLEESAN.
Oh, okay. They don't see that, unfortunately. I just hear it. And you're working with Ouya. You have a show, Pixel by Pixel, on YouTube. Where can they find all of that stuff?
Oh, Google so wisely muted my mic while I was typing. That's why. Okay. Wait, so what was the last thing?
Oh, where can they find your stuff with Ouya that you're working on now?
Ouya.tv is the best place to look out for that stuff for now.
Cool. Okay.
And pick up the console. It'll be in retail June 25th. So. Yeah.
That's so soon.
Only
I had no idea.
Yeah.
You'd be stupid not to buy one. No offense, world.
Yeah, everything's free to try.
Yeah, it's a fifth the price of some of the other consoles out
That's
there.
right.
It's almost no risk. And the games on it are relatively cheap. Some really good games coming out, too. I'm sorry, what was the name of the game again where you shoot the arrows?
Towerfall.
So I forgot it already. Yeah, that's my favorite so far. But Legend of Dungeon is really good, too. There's plenty of games for your $99. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter. I am at TronKnots. You can watch this show in rerun form on YouTube, on Dtoid TV. You can listen to it again later on iTunes. Just look up Sub Holmes on iTunes. And I made a show called Teenage Pokemon that's coming back, I think next week. And this guy made this shirt with Ditto on it. He gave it to me at E3. Because Ditto's got to have it, because Ditto's kind of overly amorous. His name is Muck You. I think you can find the shirts on muckyou.com.
Awesome.
And I guess that's it for me. Kellee, thank you so much for being on the show. I had such a good time. I really appreciate it.
That was fun.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.